everyone. I think we're going to get started again. This is something that you won't want to miss. Could we have everyone's attention? We're talking about money. How do you make money in the App Store? So this is a very popular session last year. It was one of the ones that people were really interested in, and one of the things that we got feedback on was, can we have some non-game companies? So this year we are talking about how do you make money in the App Store with a non-game. So there's a lot of interest, and we're going to have some time at the end for questions. So if you could hold your questions, but write them down, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of them, I hope. You know, how do people actually make a living at this? You know, as a small app developer or a small company of app developers. All right, so the first person is Ken, and I'll let Ken take this right now.
Cool. How many non-game developers we have here? And everyone's shipping their own apps into the store, some of them maybe for your employers. Well, I'm pretty excited to be here because despite what you probably read on the blog today, it's still possible to actually win in the App Store and make money in the App Store. And the non-game categories for me personally, as well as for Savvy Apps, has been pretty successful. We actually had an Editor's Choice Award last year for our app Agenda Calendar, Agenda Calendar 4, also another app that is pretty well known today, Weather. And beyond all those things and the data that I personally have access to, Savvy Apps has first and foremost been a consulting firm that has blossomed into also having products. So we have Agenda Calendar today, Weather, Buzz Contacts. They all make money for us, and they make a good amount of money for us. But we also have access to other non-game data, and that'll kind of influence some of the perspective here today. And beyond that, I wrote a book called App Savvy with O'Reilly a couple years ago. Still very relevant because it's a strategy and marketing book, and in fact, a lot of the things that I'm going to hit on today are actually in that book itself. But I do have to kind of color a little bit of this with a little bit of bad news first. Because when we go out and look at what's been happening in the paid app space, which is typically the revenue model when you're actually building non-games, we've seen with our own portfolio of apps, also with our customer data, and then also with a lot of discussions at conferences and colleagues in the space, that paid apps may have peaked. And what that means is the revenue per app on the paid apps has generally just been getting a little bit lower and lower, going back from really 2011 itself. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and basically that means if you can reach the very top of the rankings, you're still making a good amount of money, but if you kind of move down a little bit outside of that ranking itself, you're making less. We've also been featured a lot, and so one of the things that we've been seeing with our apps is a feature by Apple just hasn't gone as far. The number of features that they give are now actually a lot more expansive, so there's features actually going across each of the different categories. And there's some obvious other elements too, right? There's just more competition, there's more players in the space, but something that might actually not be as obvious when you look at business, productivity, utilities, is that there's actually a lot more venture-funded apps now that are going freemium. So freemium typically is the model that's used in games, but when we built Agenda back in 2011, there was maybe 2 or 3 actual legitimate calendar apps on iOS that were competitors. Now we're seeing apps like Sunrise and Any.do's Cal that are actually getting millions of dollars of investment. And the millions of dollars means that they can iterate faster than we can. They're getting big marketing budgets, and they're actually going across platforms. And it's not just calendar apps. If you look at Mailbox or Paper, these other guys, a lot of press and a lot of attention and a lot of money in the bank. So when we look at that, how do we respond? What is our approach knowing that it's that much harder to actually make money? Well, it's something that I feel like I've been talking about at conferences like this, as well as in App Savvy itself, going back a few years, and it's to really start changing our mindset. So what I want to do as we go forward in the session is kind of start taking the developer, the designer hat off, and start thinking about the fact that we are all the CEOs, we're the CMOs, we're the COOs of our business, and we have to understand that we're not just thinking about building apps. If you think you're in the business of building apps, then you're probably going to have problems long term, especially as the environment gets more and more competitive. So I want you to start thinking about building a business. What are all the components that go into building a successful business versus just building apps? if you think about someone like the late Steve Jobs, he probably was, amongst other things, and maybe first and foremost, a really good marketer. He helped Apple really kind of have a human element to it. It wasn't just about having a great computer. It was the experience of computing itself that he communicated through his role. And really when it comes down to marketing, and what I'm going to focus on are very practical marketing tips as I go through here, is you could have the very best app on the planet, but if no one actually knows about it on launch day, it doesn't matter. And I'm not looking here to kind of give you some get-rich-quick schemes. What I'm looking at is going to give you kind of a comprehensive plan going from start to finish on how to market your app. And it doesn't replace having a great app. Really what it just does is help that app succeed. So again, bear with me because I got a lot of content. I've only got 20 or 25 minutes to go through it. But I'm going to look at it through the way that we've done it and the way that's been successful for us, which is to look at it from pre-launch, launch, and then post-launch. And I'll say as a caveat to all this that this is through the lens of going into the App Store for the first time. So think about this as your version 1.0 launch. It doesn't mean for feature releases or point releases that this is not applicable. It just means that these things are even more important as you get into the App Store. So the bulk of the discussion is actually going to be on this pre-launch phase because the strategy of a lot of people is to launch the app and then start their marketing outreach. And usually that might even just be sending a tweet out there or posting on a Facebook page. Really, in order to have a successful launch, you're going to have to be doing work months and months in advance. And you're really ultimately going to need to think about your marketing strategy in the same way, in the same amount of attention that you're spending on all these different elements that are out there today. So the bulk of the discussion is going to be on this pre-launch phase itself. And to start with, and this might seem very basic, but the App Store listing. You've probably heard of App Store optimization at this point. It's getting a lot of press. But if you only spend a minute or two filling out your App Store listing, then you're actually leaving a lot of money on the table. It actually does have a little bit less impact than it used to, but it still has a fair amount of impact. And that starts with all these different components that I want to kind of break down for you step by step here. So two of our apps, Agenda Calendar, Today Weather. It was very purposeful when I named it Agenda Calendar. Could have just named it Agenda and left it at that. But actually, and Apple changed this recently, that the title of the app has the most amount of weight when it comes to ranking on the App Store. The recent change, and again, you might have read about this, is that that's a little bit less because a lot of people were keyword stuffing. So you could have put in 5 or 10 keywords into the title and you could have ranked higher. So Apple's kind of adjusted that in their algorithm. But it still holds a lot of weight. The other thing by putting a word like calendar or weather into the actual name of the app is you don't have to put that into the keyword. So that's actually a trick that a lot of people don't know. You only get 100 characters of keywords. You get an extra one if you put that into the title. So you don't have to come up with a name like 2 words, Agenda Calendar, Today Weather, but you could do something like Agenda, Simple Minimal Calendar as an example, and the same thing would work out there. A lot of keyword mistakes. First of all, we can't just be guessing on keywords. There's a lot of tools out there, and really the central focus I want to talk about is actually using those kinds of tools so they're not just guessing how your app's doing against those keywords. You actually have to measure and to see where you're ranking relative to a certain keyword, if it's actually driving traffic or not. And then there's some other basic things like actually putting spaces between each of the keywords. When you put a space, you put the keyword, a comma, and a space, you're actually losing out on characters that you could be using. You don't have to put the space there. But really, again, this is a much more scientific approach that we need to take when it comes to the keywords itself. And there's a couple of good tools. I think at least one of them was mentioned last year. But anyone use Searchman, SEO, or Sensor Tower? Anyone been using those out there? It's a really important tool because, again, we can't just kind of put in keywords and expect that they're doing something or not doing something. What this actually starts to do for you is you keep track of your rankings, where your app actually falls in terms of the traffic, and in terms of, you can then also look at the difficulty. So what you're looking for are things that are high traffic and then low in difficulty. And those are sort of your sweet spot of the keywords itself. The other thing that these tools do for you is they give you keyword suggestions. So you can put in a number of your competitors, and it'll sort of kind of guess what the keywords might be for those competitors. And you can start tracking those as well if you see there's a little competitor tab. These are paid tools, but they're pretty reasonably priced. And again, I would really encourage you to think about those. When it comes to the description, you really need to write the description for the mobile device. So you'll see here with one of our descriptions, and I know it's hard to kind of read, but it's 2 to 3 sentences maximum, and then there's features that are bolted out. Notice it's not word wrapping, because when they're on the iPhone or the iPod Touch, we want them to kind of quickly scan that. Now, the screenshots are going to be what really sells the app, but for those who want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper, they will come over to the description, and you'll want to keep it concise as possible. How many people are localizing their apps today? So probably more than in the past, but we spend a lot of time thinking about localization in our app, and that goes from the UI all the way actually to the keywords and the description. The thing that we don't actually localize is the name of the app, because from a branding perspective, we try not to do that. But you can see, because of the amount of attention we put into localization, we got the editor's choice in multiple markets. We actually got it in Germany and Italy and a number of other European markets, which are actually pretty important. You'll leave a lot of money on the table if you're not thinking about localization. It's not for every single app, but you probably should be looking into it, and there's a lot of good vendors out there if you can't translate the app. We use AppLingua. I'm not trying to plug them or have any special relationship with them, but they've been great for us for the last 3 years in helping us do localization across our apps. So we also do the screenshots, and it takes a lot of work to do the number of screenshots in all these different languages. When you get into 8 or 10 languages, it takes a long time to actually go through this, but we spend literally upwards of 3 days thinking about our screenshots, thinking about what are the key features that people may want with those screenshots, and then actually building them for all the different screen sizes. This is actually a pretty old version. This is the first version of Agenda, so these are pretty dated, but I wanted to show you what it would look like in in some of the other languages. What we've done more recently is just kind of focus more on the UI with some of our screenshots, so we don't necessarily go through all of this, but we will show localized content in the app itself. So this is kind of the App Store listing element, again, really important from the App Store optimization element. Teaser activities is the next element, though, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a calendar and schedule to think about some of these activities and move forward. And I'll just also say, again, maybe one of these things that just kind of sticks with you, it's not that there's I want you to kind of think about this as a comprehensive plan. So you may not find all of these things are applicable, but if you can grab a hold of a couple of them, I think you're gonna do better in terms of winning here. The basic element, right? Teaser screenshots going onto your beta sign-up page. We usually put this out upwards of 2 months before the app is going to hit. And you'll notice that we actually have high fidelity screens in there. Hopefully your design's done at that point and you actually can put them up, because otherwise you're not going to have a lot of people just signing up on this page. The other element here is that we try to get a lot of beta testers from this. So while you might not get press at the big blogs, those beta testers actually are going to help you eventually market the app, and they're also going to help you shake out bugs. I know it's really hard to attend events like WWDC from a cost perspective, but also because the tickets sell out in about 30 seconds. But really try to go to a WWDC every year, even if you don't have a ticket. There's a lot of other great networking events that happen, but really the reason why I advocate this is there's 3 different groups that you can meet with. First of all, fellow peers and colleagues like the guys and gals in this room. Secondly, press. And the press wants to talk to developers. They want to get perspectives from the developers. They want to quote you on their blogs. And even if you don't get an app write-up, you start forming these relationships that later they might come back to you and say, yeah, I want to take a look at your app. So we go and meet with pretty much all the major blogs every year. And it's just because we form relationships with them on Twitter. And we also demoed Agenda, the first version, at WWDC about 2011, and literally got write-ups on every single site because we showed them in-person demos of the app going back to that time. And then finally, App Store team itself. How many people meet with the App Store team at WWDC? You should be meeting with them because you'll actually meet the managers, the people that actually select the apps every week. And Apple's never going to, we've been featured 7 times, but they never guarantee or commit to anything, right? Very non-committal, but you can go and actually shake hands with people, show them the app, and that's really the final group. So I would say the cost of the WWDC ticket is worth that alone, being able to go sit down with the App Store manager team. Anyone see the Clear for iPhone video when it first came out a number of years ago? Probably one of the things that put Clear immediately into the top echelon of apps on the App Store, making over $1 million in something like 10 days. If you take one thing away from my talk here, it would be to think about doing a professional video, a professional trailer. Rob just had obviously a great session talking about this, but actually doing a professional video trailer for your app. This is actually some behind the scenes footage from the Clear for iPhone shoot that they did, and the Real Mac guys were happy to send this over, showing you on that side. And then on the right, Mark Kawano, who is a former UI evangelist at Apple, his studio shoot for Storehouse, and I don't know if you saw this, it was featured by Apple, I think a couple of weeks ago. Obviously the former Apple connection helps, but so does this stuff. How much money are people spending on these kind of promo items? Well, when you look at Clear and talking with some other developers, knowing also what we spend, $3,000 to $5,000 to get a professionally done video. And that seems like a little bit of investment, but if you're gonna be in the App Store, I'd say that this is a worthwhile investment, because aside from all of your other marketing, this one might be the one that puts you on the top. On the other side, the studios, and you look at Lonely Sandwich and all those guys, those are 5 figures and maybe even 6-figure budgets. So when you think about how much money those apps are spending and those guys are spending, I think we can find $3,000 to $5,000 to get something professionally done. What we do is send out all of these kinds of links to every single one of our contacts. So we have a trailer video, the website itself, which is usually in kind of a beta state before the actual launch day. We give them a promo code because, and we'll talk about the schedule, we give them a promo code even if they've been on the beta. So Tokens app, who's using Tokens? Really, really good app. It actually allows you to track and see who's actually installed the app. So if you send it to a press contact, it'll show you if they redeem it, and it's a good signal to actually follow up with one of those people. And then finally the press kit. I want to show you what we do for our press kit, and we do this for every single one of our apps. So all of the App Store components are in there. Again, it's a little hard to see on the lighting here. But every single one of the App Store listed components, so that includes the icon at all the sizes, both rounded and squared, and then hero images, so we kind of highlight some of the images that they might actually put into their posts, and we give them a demo, even if they don't want to see the trailer or download the beta, a demo of about 30 seconds. So this is kind of a non-committal way. They don't have to install something on their device. They don't have to go over to a Vimeo link. They literally can check out a 30-second clip of this. The App Store URL, because remember for version 1.0, it's not in the App Store yet, so they don't know what the URL is. You want to give it to them as much information as possible so that they can actually, don't have to go look up any of this stuff. And then finally, an App Store reviewer's guide. And we spend usually a few days on this reviewer's guide that gives all the pro tips of the app. So this is only for the people that really are excited about the application, but again, it gives them an easy way to digest this stuff. So think about doing something like this. And also I've been trying to point out, we try to give these custom URLs. So just going back again, make it memorable for them, not just sort of a bit.ly link that has some hexadecimal stuff in there. The token code does that. But for the press kits, we try to make it something that is a little bit more clear and less guessable. So going back into kind of putting this into the calendar and the schedule in your mind, we submit to Apple 3 weeks in advance of what our target for 1.0 is. There's a few reasons for that. The first reason is that we actually want to know the definitive date that we can tell our press contacts the app is going to hit. Because we don't want them kind of guessing and saying, oh, it might be this week, it might be the next week. We want to have ample time. The other thing is, and this actually happened to one of our apps recently, can get stuck into review for any number of reasons, right? So we want to sort of have ample time to go through the review process, and that's an important point as it relates to going 3 weeks early. We also try to get the promo video done by that point. Moving 2 weeks before, the press kit should be done, and then 1 week before, we're actually giving the app to all of our contacts. This gives them a pretty long time in terms of being able to experience the app. Think about this versus actually doing that on the launch day itself, so that by the time we're actually hitting the 1.0, they're ready to go. Also, draft of initial FAQs. I'll talk more about FAQs, but we really want to try to get all the common questions addressed. So as we've done beta testing, we're actually collecting common questions that people have, and then we're going to publish that on launch day itself versus kind of waiting a week or two and then start getting the FAQs out there. So again, all that was done before the actual launch itself. So now we're kind of start moving into the launch phase. What we'll actually look at doing is a soft launch the night before. And the reason why is that it still sometimes could be a little bit dicey with how long it takes to propagate into the App Store. So we actually do a 11 p.m. Eastern launch. And I will use Eastern times because there's some benefit of doing kind of an Eastern and then a Pacific launch when you're reaching out to a lot of your US contacts in particular. But we'll do this, and we're not trying to announce this to anyone at this point. So no one is actually being notified. We're not tweeting about this. We're not putting this on Facebook or any of our other outlets. This is just to make sure the listing looks good. We can purchase the app, publish the website, because again, remember, your App Store badge on the website isn't going to be linked to the App Store, and actually tap on that badge, make sure you can connect to the actual App Store, and then see if there's any initial things that come in. We actually have some customers, and there's not hundreds of millions of them yet, but people who wait up late to see when our app hits the store, and they might email us and get in touch with us through Twitter or some other places to let us know there could be a problem. But we also, for the smaller blogs, they'll like to be the first ones to publish the post, and we'll start taking some of those quotes and kind of social proofing the listing, both the listing itself and the website. And I'll talk with that a little bit more about that. But again, you're not publicizing anything about the application at this point. Release the hounds. What we mean by this is everything within your power, because there's a lot of things outside of your power from the marketing standpoint, on the morning of the actual launch, get those things moving. So hopefully you actually have a good number of people on your email newsletter. We have one both for the actual app as well as for Savvy Apps as a whole. We leverage both of those. Facebook, we've been investing a lot into Facebook, building up that audience. All these places that you can control, get the word out there and get all the people that are hopefully excited about the app buying it early in the morning. And you really should be ranking by the morning. So get in 5 or 6 hours sleep after you do that launch. Get up early, and then if you don't see the app ranking pretty early in the morning, you're probably not going to have a great launch, unfortunately. So you should really start to see some traction being in the top 200 or so for your category if it's going to be a good launch. Social proofing. This is a pretty neat little feature that Bitly has called a bundle. And basically what you could do is you can create a page on the fly and put a bunch of different links in there. So when we're getting written up on Mac Stories, 2OW, Lifehacker, all these different places, we basically create a little page with a very easy link to remember. And we link that off of our actual website so that someone can come over and see the reviews as they come in one single location. We do pull out quotes, and you can see that on the next slide here. We pull out those quotes, and we try to cycle these over the first few weeks onto the App Store listing and cycle them also on the website itself. But that's a great place for prospective buyers just to see everything that's been said about your app. The strategy of kind of trying to push yourself over the top on launch day and kind of keeping attuned to what's happening out in the industry is actually important. So a lot of strategies are just kind of start the outreach. We're not starting the outreach, we're just trying to push ourselves a little bit higher. And so, try not to bother Mr. Gruber over at Daring Fireball, but saw something that was happening on the day of our agenda launch, our agenda calendar for our launch. And it was just kind of a lot of stories talking about whether people were going to actually do paid apps as separate apps in iOS 7. So I sent over a little link that we had just launched Agenda Calendar 4 as a separate paid app, and he happened to wind up linking us up. So think about this kind of stuff, find relevant information, make it easy for your press contacts to not have to do a lot of work, and you can possibly get things like this. Support is marketing, and that's not a popular opinion. No one really wants to do support, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to get out of the difficulties and the struggles to support. But what we try to do with our support is make it so that literally only bugs come in or feature requests come in. And we actually hunt down people who will write 1 or 2 star reviews and try to change those into 3, 4, and 5 star reviews. Thankfully, we don't get a lot of them, so it's pretty easy to do that. It just kind of Google someone, look up someone on Twitter, and get those things turned and converted over. But you do have some of the people out there that are just, you're not going to win them over. So don't go too over the top when it comes to support, but really put more effort into it than just kind of like, oh, this is the last thing I want to do today. And one of the ways to do that is to actually invest into products like Zendesk or Help Scout. We publish the FAQ on the day of launch, so people who contact us really are giving us valuable feedback. Everything else should hopefully be answered in the support forum itself. And again, we've looked at a lot of them, but depending on your own preference, something like Zendesk might be a good paid option there. Final thing on launch day, start prioritizing your 101 because you're going to follow up quickly and kind of build more trust and excitement with your customers by getting this out there. Post-launch and kind of coming into the final part of this discussion, first thing, know your numbers. There's a lot of different numbers out there that you should be looking at. We look at things like revenue by country. This is from a tool called App Figures. Anyone using App Figures out there? I really like App Figures because they give you, an email digest every morning of how all of your apps are doing. But then you can quickly look at things like revenue by country. And if you aren't, thinking that localization is something you want to do, just kind of look at some of these numbers here, and you can see that we make as much money outside of the U.S. kind of combined as we do in the U.S. itself, and that really boosts us up quite a bit higher in terms of our revenue numbers. Support turnaround time, already mentioned ratings and reviews. Analytics, obviously, if you have analytics in the app. And then here's a pretty good little piece of data for you. 30 to 50% of the lifetime revenue of the app may actually be made in the first month. That's across our own portfolio, talking with some other developers out there. So if you're making $500 in the first month, you may not want to keep working on that app going forward. You got to weigh all your costs, time, opportunity costs, support, API fees, and we've even done this ourselves. Buzz Contacts, it was a featured app. It was ranked as high as something like 27 overall paid apps. We had to eventually pull it off the App Store because Apple wasn't kind of maturing iOS 7. This is an app that was doing, making it faster to kind of do contacts through phone calls. We couldn't get incoming or outgoing calls. And eventually, we just couldn't keep supporting that app. We cut the loss, and it was something that was a hard decision, but ultimately is helping us be more profitable as a result of that. In terms of your roadmap, just keep your contacts informed of what's happening. Find a win for 1.1. We get people excited and wanting to write 1.1 updates on their blogs. App Advice is a good example. Whenever we have a significant update come out, they actually will write up another update for us, another post for us. And then really what it comes down to this is test, measure, repeat. So I think it was mentioned in James' discussion, it's not just a checkbox for the interface or accessibility. It's not just a checkbox for marketing. This isn't something that just happens one time and then you're done. You got to keep looking at your keywords, your screenshots, your App Store description, all these elements. We're constantly making updates on these every single time we go through this. So final thoughts, and then I'll let my colleagues kind of come up here. First of all, paid apps aren't dead. It's just a little bit harder to do, and you have to think about these kinds of elements to be successful. Again, people are still successful, and if you can break from even being the top in your category into the top paid apps, there's a lot of money to be made in paid apps still. Unfortunately, freemium's not proven outside of games. You really need venture funding. You need millions in the bank, so you're leaving money on the table. I can tell you because we've tried it ourselves. You leave money on the table if you do freemium and you don't have that kind of venture funding backing you and these categories itself. Improve or die, just think about all these different things that are changing. Customer preferences, ranking algorithms, the devices itself, iOS, Apple's changing as a company, their leadership, their policies. So always make small changes to all these different items, test the impact, rinse and repeat, and you'll be in much better shape. Finally, love what you do. I think this is something that's coming through in a lot of the discussions today, but care more than others, sweat the small stuff, not just in the design, not just in the development, but even in this marketing element. So apologize for blowing through that, but I need to get my other guys up here. So thanks for listening, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Hi everyone. So my name is Zulfi Shah. I'm founder of Zal LLC, which is a single-person company. It's just me, and I work on one app specifically called Contacts Journal CRM, which I make a living off on the App Store revenues. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and about the product, and about some recommendations for creating a winning product. So just a little bit about myself. I was at PayPal for about 6 years. I worked on the fraud detection and risk management teams as a software engineer. I had a chance to work on the iPhone client as well for about a year and a half. One notable feature that I worked on there was check capture, where you can take a picture of a check and deposit it directly to your PayPal account. I've been independent for the last 2.5 years. I've been working exclusively on Contacts Journal, where I do everything from software development to QA, support, business development, all that good stuff. There's no outside financing, and I don't do any freelance work outside of this. So what does Contact Journal do? It's a CRM application. It's a tool for you to organize your relationships with your contacts, whether they're your clients, your customers, your sales prospects, even your own personal contacts. So the very basic level, for each of your contacts, you can create a series of notes about previous meetings you had and where you had them. You can set tasks or add appointments directly to your calendar. You can attach files and documents and view them later. You can create custom fields that go beyond what the Contacts app offers. And then there's a lot of auxiliary features like iCloud syncing, core data, Dropbox, contact group management, like creating groups, managing groups. You can even take all the addresses from your contacts list and geocode them and plot them on a map view. So I've been lucky to be featured by Apple recently in a few places. So in the Start Your Business category, you can see the app there. There's a new segment that was added recently, it's Grow Your Career, so Contact Journal is over there as well. And if you go to the business section of the App Store, it's one of the big banners on top. So here's a couple of links to like the iPhone and iPad app. And the iPhone app is $10, the iPad app is $20. It's been on the App Store for about more than 4 years now. So it's a business app with some consumer level design aspirations. By that, I mean that it's intuitive, uncomplicated. It's free of jargon that you might find in like a CRM application or any other business application. And as far as customers go, I see a lot of people who work in professional sales, or who do sales as their job. There are a lot of people who work, who own small businesses, who might be one or two people shops, like flower delivery shop or like a plumbing service or something. They really like the app as well. Anybody who has the key component of their job is that they deal with customers or clients, like insurance agents or real estate agents. So it's come to a point where for a lot of these people, a lot of my users, like this app is really crucial to their job and to their business, and that's a very good place to be. So how do you, when you think about winning, how do you create a winning product on the App Store? What are some of the things you want to think about when creating the product itself? So these are some of my thoughts about this. You want to create something that has, a lot of value for your customers, right? You have to think about what the value proposition is. Why would somebody download the app? What is, why would they be excited about the app? Why would they continue to use it in the long term and not just use it for a couple of launches and then discard it? So you want to aim to create something for very lasting value. And this goes without saying, like quality, like if you want to be noticed on the App Store, you need to create something of a very high standard of quality. And that goes beyond what the app actually does. It's also about how the app looks, how the app performs. Is it slow? Does it have a lot of bugs? Does it crash a lot? And you also need to think about analytics to analyze user behavior. You need to think about crash reporting tools to improve the quality of your app. And you need to think about customer support as well. So all of these go into building like a high quality product. And it's also very important to know like what your target audience is. Who's your ideal customer, right? So this is important while you're developing the app initially, but also as you go along, as you launch the app and it's on the App Store, you need to keep talking to your customers and try to figure out who is actually using the app more. When I started the app, I had no idea that so many professional salespeople would be using it. But as I sort of got feedback and I figured out what they're doing and what they're doing with the app, it really helped me position the app a little differently. I was able to price it higher. I was able to think about what kind of features I wanted to build into the app. And the ultimate goal is obviously to create something that's sustainable, that's self-sustaining, that's independent of other sources of funding. And there are various options for generating revenue on the App Store, but it's not easy, right? Like the App Store market is pretty competitive. But I think with the right product, it's still very possible. And so the next piece of advice that I have is pretty specific, and hopefully it gives some food for thought for people who are thinking about creating a new venture based on an iOS app. It's my own opinion. Obviously, there are different data points, and you can disagree with this or not. But I think my main thesis is that business apps as such are pretty undervalued and they're underserved. There's a lot of people who I see using my app, for instance, who are using it for their jobs or for their businesses, and I don't know how many apps that I see on the App Store which are compelling for them. There's a lot of focus in the iOS app community about games, about entertainment titles, and music and video editing tools and social networking, and that makes sense because that's where a lot of the focus is, a lot of the demand from users is. Those are the kind of apps that Apple also features a lot, but that's where the competition is also the most intense. So you need more and more resources to compete against those kind of applications. So if you're thinking about new ventures, you want to think about some niche market or some niche use case where you can stand out more. And I think this is a really good market to think about. And it's not just about enterprise applications, which are harder to crack into. This is just about solving problems for small businesses, right? You can think about particular verticals to address real estate or law firms. You can think about some general problems that small businesses might have, helping them go paperless, or helping their accounting, helping schedule management, for instance. And, a lot of these, this iPhones and iPads are so powerful. There's a lot of innovation that needs to, still to happen based on all the fancy hardware you get with, these devices. And the big benefit of addressing this market is that you can price your app a lot higher than you would normally. If you can create a high quality product, especially, and that solves a business problem, solves a big productivity problem for a lot of people. People pay more if you help their businesses succeed. So. And so, if you are addressing this market, your reputation obviously goes a long way into succeeding. The quality, you don't get people who buy $10 apps on an impulse, right? If they just see it, they do a lot of research, they'll ask you questions, they'll look at your ratings, your reviews. So, your reputation is very important, and your support as well, because they expect a higher level of engagement from the business that's selling, such a product. But even if you're a single person, company, or 2-3 people, it shouldn't be too cumbersome. I think in my experience, if you reply to emails, even within 24 hours, most people are pretty satisfied with that, or sort of impressed with it even. So there are some downsides about this market. Obviously, it might not be a vehicle for spectacular growth. The $10 app is not going to go viral the same way as a free app will. And depending on how specialized you make your app, you could be addressing a very small market. So you need to make sure that you do your research. And even the general technology press might not sort of focus so much on these things. Neither does Apple. Other than these two segments that I was a part of. You don't get featured on the App Store main page that often. But if you're thinking of creating a new company, bootstrapping it through App Store revenues, I think this is a pretty good market to think about. Building something that's sustainable and substantial as well. So that's it, I think, for me. If you have any questions, I'll be on the panel later on. Thanks.
everybody. It's been a pretty long day. My comments will be reasonably brief. So, Zulfi and Ken covered a lot of territory, and I will echo some of the things they say, probably slightly contradict a few of them as well. My name is Greg Pierce. I'm the founder and only person at Agile Tortoise, Inc. I've been doing indie app development and consulting since 2006 and kind of moved slowly from being full-time consulting to being close to full-time with my own apps now. I'm pretty easy to find on your various social networks. What do I do? The app I'm probably most likely to be known for is Drafts, which is a quick capture note-taking app in the productivity category. I make Terminology, which is a dictionary thesaurus app that's been in the store since July 2010, and Phraseology, which is a writing app for longer form writing with linguistic tools that's kind of geared a little more towards education. All of these apps have been around for a while, 2 years or more, and are at versions 3.5, 3, and 2.0 shipping. They've all done very well. They've all ranked top 25 overall iPad, top 100 iPhone, top 5 in their category. In addition to these, I've done another number of other apps that basically did nothing. I have a utility app I tried to sell for a while, a counter app. It's free now because nobody bought it. Social networking app that's long gone, an entertainment app that serves a very small niche that you wouldn't have heard of. And I bring those up that think that for every win you're going to have in the app stores in India, you'll probably have some losses as well, and you need to be prepared for that. So, depending on how you define winning, especially in the non-game categories, depends on how you're going to define success. If you think winning looks something like this, I think you're in the wrong place. I've had 3 successful apps that have ranked well, that have consistently sold, but Apple's not driving a U-Haul full of cash up to my door and dumping it every month, nor are they likely to. For me, as an indie, I define success a little more like this. I want to build a sustainable business that allows me to support my family and have the independent lifestyle I like. And for all we talk about what's unique about the App Store market and economy, sustainability is really common sense. Yes, there's very specific things about the App Store that are different, but that's the 1%, and the 99% is business just like any other business that's shaped by its distribution channels and the type of product it has. So I kind of thought about what common sense advice I could give and broke it down into one sentence that's pretty simple, and but is the way I kind of operate on a day-to-day basis. You need to start by making something, right? If you're not actually finishing something and shipping it, you're not going to be making any money. And there's a lot of talk in the App Store community about polish and about getting everything right and sweating the pixels, and that's great, and you do need to make a high-quality product to succeed in the App Store, but you can't, as an indie, spend 2 years polishing your pixels and ship something that's a flop. You've got to make serious decisions about what a minimum viable product on a concept is, and get it in the store and see if it's worth developing and spending more time on. You got to make something genuinely useful. In productivity and utility and reference, the apps that are successful are the apps that people put on their home screen, that they use every day, day in and day out, that they install as soon as they get a new device. So you've got to have some functionality core aspect of your app they can't live without, whether that's by doing something like a calendar that everyone uses or finding some other unique twist. You're going to have that. To my mind, it's got to be genuinely useful to a lot of people. There are niches like Zulfi serves, professional type of categories where you can charge more and serve a small community, but with the price pressures what they are in the App Store, you're really going to need broad appeal to move the numbers to build a sustainable business. So you got to make something genuinely useful to a lot of people, and you got to tell them about it. That's the marketing aspect. You've got to tell them about it over and over again. You've got to go door to door for your app. You got to hit the pavement and approach people and be able to tell them what's different or special about your app. And this isn't something you do once and then you launch the app and you see how it does. This is a iterative process. You get your minimum viable product in the store, you've made it, you make it better. You ship frequent updates. That's how I work. A lot of people don't work that way in the App Store. They think you've got to go from a 1.0 to 2.0 with only bug fixes in between. I don't feel that way. I try to ship frequent updates with new features to keep people engaged with the app. If it's genuinely useful, improve the functionality, listen to your users, figure out how you can remove a tap here or a swipe here to make it even more useful to them or easier. If you've made it appeal to a lot of people, figure out how you can broaden the appeal. My app Drafts, I've been able to sustain and grow it much because the nature of the app lends itself to this. The 1.0 version that shipped 2 years ago didn't do what the 3.5 version does now, but over time, the unique feature of the app is its broad range of export options, and by adding support for deep integration with Dropbox, I added a bigger user base. Later, I added Evernote and other, app.net posting and things that made it more appealing to more different people. And you got to keep telling them about it. Orchestrating launch press is important, and Ken covered the details of that. But you can't orchestrate a bunch of launch press and then disappear, because maybe you're lucky you get featured by Apple, but that lasts a few weeks, and you have to find a way to stay visible to users. And I think the best way to do that is foster community around your app. Free press is the best press you can get. Word of mouth is the best free press. If people know about your app, they tell their friends about it, people see it on their home screens. You got to be active on social media. You got to post tips and tricks for your app, respond to users' questions promptly, and you've got to know your power users and court them. In productivity particularly, you're going to have some productivity geeks that like your app, and you've got to recognize them. You've got to get them on your beta list. You've got to, if they post a blog post about your app, you've got to seek those things out and retweet them and let those people know you appreciate them helping to spread the word. And as Ken mentioned, you got to provide great support because people remember that. And if you're trying to build a sustainable business, you're going to have more than one product over time. And people remember when you respond to their questions. Even if they send in the dumb feature requests, you explain to them why it wouldn't work for the app. You don't just ignore them because people remember that kind of response. And kind of my last thought, particularly again for the productivity category, is play well with others. In the sandboxed environment on iOS, there's limited ways apps can work together. Anybody who knows me and my apps knows that I do a lot with URL schemes. And you've got to try to think of what are the things that your app does that it could share with other apps, provide services via URL schemes, and you got to think about ways other apps make things available that you can take advantage of. A great example of that is Ken's Agenda app, which did a really cool thing in their last version, which was to recognize that a calendar app has several different functions. You might love Agenda's view for looking at a calendar, but you might want to use Fantastical to create events. So he provided a way to integrate with Fantastical and some other calendar apps via URL schemes, so you could literally change your default. When you say new event in Agenda, you could use their own new event thing, or it would pop you over to Fantastical for you to create the event and go right back to Agenda. And those are the same kind of synergies I try to create in my own apps. And embrace your competitors. Just because you put a text editor out, don't think everybody else with a text editor is your enemy. Because in productivity, again, the people who really use their iPhones for text probably have 4 different text editors on their phone that they like for different reasons and use for different aspects. And if you can work together with those apps, it's great. Terminology and drafts, my apps both provide ways to create custom actions that use URL schemes with other apps. I keep a directory of ready to install examples of those actions. I link to these other apps. I hope people go buy them. And of course, I use affiliate links for that. And if you're any kind of indie and you're not using affiliate links, you should skip the reception tonight and go sign up for it, because you're leaving 7% on the table. I mean, even the links from your own website to the App Store that are a very high conversion rate, you're leaving 7% of that revenue just sitting there if you're not using the affiliate program. And that's kind of all I had. Don't be afraid to launch small and build too. You can have an app that doesn't get huge right off the bat. But Drafts, what launched 2 years ago, it won a Macworld Eddie Award at the end of 2013. It took almost 2 years to get to that level of recognition and quality, but it did, and you can do it that way. So that's kind of what I have. I think we're going to Q&A now. Thanks.
All right. So I think this is a subject that's of interest to everybody here in this crowd. Yes? Yeah? All right. So questions. So just to start us off, come on out from over there. I know you can't, but so one question that I had was, you guys talked about timing the launch. Is it a good time to launch during a busy time in the App Store, a slow time? Is there a time of year that you think this is the best thing to do to launch a new app?
I don't think the time of year matters. You always want to launch, I mean, per Ken's basic thing, I don't think he actually mentioned, you want that launch to be at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night because of the App Store refresh on Thursday. But other than that, I don't think it matters that much.
I mean, I'll just say that we look a lot at what else is happening, just in terms of other app launches that we might know about that possibly could overshadow. And then in terms of that Wednesday thing, I'll just throw out something slightly counter to that, because again, a lot of people do the trick. If you know, basically the App Store refresh is on a Thursday, so a lot of apps are going into the App Store on Wednesday. So what we've actually started doing is going on Tuesday night, because if we didn't do that in a couple of cases, for example, we would have been overshadowed by Google Maps, which is the #1 free app on the App Store when it came out. So we've actually been pulled back a little bit and gotten more on those on Tuesday night going into Wednesday, but more generally just being aware of what else is happening around the time of your prospective launch.
But quick follow-up to that question. Have you noticed anything that goes up when new devices get out there? Like more people download, anything like that?
I'll just chime in that, we try to be first, and Bill mentioned this this morning in his talk, the ability to be first and what that actually does for you. So we actually try to, when iOS 7 hits or when the iPhone 5 hit, we actually have new updates prepared for that day and can capitalize on that and see a big bounce because of those things.
Yes, question.
You raised a comment that business apps shouldn't do freemium unless they have venture capital, which seemed really insightful, but I don't understand why.
Sure. So there's it's really anything that's not a game. I mentioned it briefly, and guys, I know I went a little fast, so thank you for bearing with me on that. But I did mention 3 different elements. The first is the ability to build faster. So when they get lots of money, they'll have a team of developers versus just me or me and a couple guys. So that's #1. #2 is the marketing budget. So they actually take, for example, you might not know that King.com, they have $43 million of investment. They make money on the App Store. They take all that money and they put it back into marketing, right? So advertisement, paid media. And then the third thing is the multi-platform support, right? So they can actually support apps on multiple platforms. So it goes back to iterating faster and having larger product teams. So those would be the 3 reasons why those guys can do it. And if I don't want to get into the whole venture side, but long runways, right, for companies that are looking just to have millions and millions of customers, build networks, build more apps, versus people who have to put on food on the table. I think Greg's drawing of the happy family is a good example of like the way we live versus the way those guys are living.
Hi, Zulfi, I was wondering if you could comment on how many iPad versus iPhone users you get.
That's a great question because I actually have many more iPad users than iPhone users. It was one of the recommendations I was thinking about initially. Like, if you're building a new app, like do not ignore the iPad. Like I created the iPad version when the iPad launched initially. Like so it was there like as soon as the iPad hit the store, and it proved to be really useful for me. Double revenues immediately, and even now it's 2/3 of revenues come from the iPad. And it's part of the thing calculation is that the iPad app costs like $20, so it's obviously like there, but like even in terms of gross revenue, it's higher.
What are you guys' thoughts on in-app subscriptions?
I have not used in-app purchase at all because I know my user base would find it annoying. I have an app like in Drafts, when I said I broadened the appeal of it, I have a model that could fit with that pretty well. I could unlock integration with Evernote, say, with an in-app purchase. But I think that most people in productivity category in particular find it nickel and dimey and don't like it and would rather just buy the app up front. Plus, to my mind, there's 2 ways to look at that. You could do the pay plus in-app purchase to unlock additional things, and that tends to annoy people because they've already paid something for it. And if you go to the free, from my point of view, I don't want that additional 100 times downloads of the free version that I have to support. I would rather have a small set of manageable customers that I can support and have invested in my app.
And just to clarify, do you mean subscriptions or just in-app purchases in general?
Yeah, it was up there. I meant subscriptions. So one kind of thing that people have is you have like one payment in the very beginning, right, versus a stream of payments that you fill up the web. I know that there's limited support for non-programmables on the App Store, but just wondering what your guys' thoughts. Have you ever considered going over that business model?
Yeah, so on the script, I think everything Greg said is spot on just in general with the sort of paymium or freemium stuff. But the problem is exactly what you just pointed out, which is it's pretty limited in terms of what you're able to do. So I think anyone who's tried to do that in our space has basically been told by Apple that you're not allowed to. So unfortunately, it doesn't work in this category as far as I've seen to date.
Yeah, I think it's part of the appeal for a lot of users is also that they don't have to pay subscriptions for whatever app they're using. So if you use subscriptions, Evernote uses it, or something like Pandora or somebody would use subscription models. They can get away with it. I think most apps are probably going to suffer if they do that.
I think all 3 of you mentioned that in addition to selling your own apps on the store, you also do consulting work. I was wondering if, in terms of earnings, you find that you sell your own apps on the store because it's competitive with the consulting work, or because you enjoy doing it, or how that balance works out for you, what your motives are.
Me?
For all of you, because I think all 3 of you mentioned that.
I don't do consulting work on the side. And I know that.
When I started my business in 2006, I consulted full time. Obviously, the iPhone wasn't even out, and I saw an opportunity there. So within another year or 2, will I be 100% my apps? Maybe, hopefully. But yeah, it's been over time, the 2 have changed. And for me personally, I've segmented it. The consulting work I do is all web development. I don't take any iOS consulting work. It just helps me keep the boundary in my personal workflow.
Yeah, and just for us, I think we were chatting about this before, but we actually have people at Savvy Apps dedicated to doing our own apps. And so we were first a consulting firm that kind of grew the product stuff and we're able to dedicate more time and attention. But in terms of, what do you do, what are you making on those, your own apps versus the other guys, that's where it was mentioned in the beginning, the revenue per app is kind of coming down, and so you do have to look at those things a little bit as well. But we still enjoy doing that, and we're still investing into those apps.
Hi, I was wondering how you gentlemen feel about the practice of doing a soft launch in a market that might not be your primary market. For instance, a lot of game companies, they might launch a game in Canada or the Philippines before the US.
I can take that one first. Yeah. So that's pretty common, especially in games. And again, we're not building games, but pretty much anyone that does a game, and you should go talk to Mark Johnson somewhere out there. But he's actually doing that. There you are, Mark. So he's actually doing that right now. He's in the hat in the front here. He's doing that right now with a launch in Canada, and that's pretty popular with games. It's a little bit less popular with productivity because of some of the things that we've mentioned. There's some initial buzz that just gets built in with these kinds of categories. The other thing, unfortunately, Apple hasn't done this, but Google is doing a great job in this sort of limited beta rollout, so you can kind of choose how many people get the app and actually use the Google Play Store to do that. So I'm hoping Apple will do something similar so that we don't have to do actual marketing and selecting just a region like Canada. So it's a good idea, but it usually doesn't work in our categories.
I think there's a question over there in the corner, but as we're moving over there, what are your thoughts on pricing apps, like launch day versus later on? Do you have a particular method that you're following? Any of you?
So in my case, at least, like I've only launched like one app. So I guess I launched a second app a year later, which just basically did nothing. So I support it like once a year. But with Contacts Journal, when I launched it, it was sort of a side project for me. I was still working at PayPal, I priced it at $2 or $3, and but as I've grown, the features in it, I've seen who it appeals to, I've sort of raised the price, more and more actually.
Other thoughts from either of you?
I mean, I just try to price in a way that's consistent with my competitors. I've released drafts as separate iPhone and iPad apps, and a lot of people like a universal app, but I also think you hit better price points by separating them, because you've got a lot of people who have an iPhone and don't have an iPad and aren't willing to pay the extra $2 or $3 for the universal version that you would need to charge. So I think that breaks it up nicely. I tend to do an initial launch pricing, but I don't do some dramatic 99-cent sale, probably $1.99 instead of $2.99 for the first week, which just kind of helps with your initial rankings.
I usually try to start higher, and then you have the flexibility to go lower. And Greg brings up a good point. There's no definitive right way to do this. You can rank a little bit higher, but the people who initially really care about your app are going to buy it when it first comes out. So again, it's kind of like you're penalizing them, but you are going to leave money on the table when you could have sold it for $4.99 or $3.99 or $2.99. And again, starting higher gives you the ability to drop down moving forward. So there's pros and cons to all the approaches, but we tend to keep it at the higher price and then drop it down, especially if we're going to reach some kind of demarcation point in the App Store and try to get into the top 10 or top 25. That's when we start dropping the price to kind of just push past in the initial launch.
All right, question in the back.
The pricing was actually my question. Thanks.
Another question in the front?
How do you guys deal with bad reviews? I actually killed one of my apps.
Okay, so the question is, how do you deal with bad reviews? He actually killed one of his apps because of bad reviews.
First, you don't kill the customer, you just kill the app. But no, seriously, I actually mentioned, and we do this, we're pretty obsessive about it. We don't want any 1 or 2 star reviews. So what we do is we'll actually start trying to get information about that person. And a lot of times, and it seems kind of basic, right? We all use the same handle. So we'll start with Twitter and see if they have a Twitter account. And even if they're not super active, we might start there. We track them down on Facebook, and we message them and say, hey, we saw this review. Can we help you with this? What's your problem? The problem is if you have like 30 of those, right, or 40 of those, that's not a scalable solution. So there's something fundamentally wrong with the app at that point. But if you have, just a handful of those lower ones, you can typically turn those around.
One tip that I would add is that you can actually go into iTunes Connect and go through one of the forms there where you can actually tell Apple if at least the review is like really crazy out there, like this app is a scam or something that pitches a competitor. You can actually ask them to review that review, and a lot of times they actually take it off. Like I've had like 50% success with taking off bad reviews that way. And yeah, I mean, if somebody emails you, or I mean, for me, like I don't know, somehow I've never found like the iTunes handles to be similar to their Twitter handles. If I could, like, yeah, it's a great way to track them.
I ignore them. I just don't have time to try to either track them down or to, because I feel like I don't know how much damage they do. Because the ones that actually write something with their 1-star review, it usually sounds so crazy that anybody who took the time to read that review would discard it from their evaluation process anyway.
Well, a lot of times you get people who love the app and they leave a 1-star review as well. So like they misunderstand the review system or something.
Oh, I have a screenshot. I got a once. The written review said perfect, and it was 2 stars. It was just like I had to take a screenshot of it.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could elaborate on just courting interest from the press, like if there are certain websites that you feel like you absolutely have to be featured on, and also, if you don't have the press coming to you, like what are some ways to approach people in the press?
I have a very personal approach to marketing, and I've built relationships over the time because I've been at it for years. So I have contacts at some of the bigger places now, and I have people I know will reply to my emails and look at my apps, but that took a long time. And I just started small, and when I go to market one of my apps, I just try to spend a couple hours every week, and I go to Google and I search for people who have written about similar types of apps or expressed an interest in something that fits the category, and I go approach the bloggers directly with personal emails explaining that, hey, I read your post about this. I think you might like to look at my app for this reason. And yeah, it's hitting the pavement. It's going door to door for your app to build those relationships.
In my case, at least, like I found that being listed on some app review website has done pretty much nothing for download numbers. I was like once featured in a New York Times article, and like I had basically no impact on anything. So I mean, the best thing is to get featured by Apple. Obviously, that's hard work. And there's a great tip that Ken gave, like WWDC. Like if you go to the App Store labs up there, like that's how I made a couple of connections with people in App Store marketing, and they've helped me get featured on the App Store. So like, if you get a chance to go to WWDC, definitely.
If you haven't watched the marketing video from the most recent Tech Talks, there's some real gems in there that I hadn't seen in any WWDC content or anything on how to approach the App Store team and stuff.
Yeah, they mentioned a few email addresses as well.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you.